Hello everyone, let me show you how to assemble. Get better is this one without runner numbers. New Type is a fast and reliable source of Gunpla supplies in the US. For my fellow Canadians, our Gamma Hobby offers the largest stock of kits, tools, and paints. I have panel lined, enamel hand painted, apply decals, and top coated. And yes, in that order. If you'd like to see the full uncut version, check out my Patreon. Now, let's get on to assembly. This is how the top coat has dried. Let's unclip them. This is how I've got my final assembly set up. I usually do the assembly right on top of the manual so that I can see it very clearly. I've got all of the outer armor parts here. They are not categorized by runners because I just couldn't manage to keep them all well categorized as I was working with them. These ones are labeled very clearly because inner frame parts are a lot smaller, and I try to use low level trays instead of trays that are really high and you can't really see over them like this one. These are my daughter's frying pans. Two of what I think are the most important tools, at least a parts opener, arts knife. I might sand the joints or use pliers if I need to take apart parts that are a little tight. Let's get going. The method I use to assemble without runner numbers after painting is to categorize my parts by runner letters. I've got videos detailing this. So I do not pre-assemble or disassemble before painting to save time and avoid the risk of breaking parts. The con of this is it can take a little more time to find the pieces during final assembly. However, by that point, I've already worked with every part of the kit so much that I almost immediately recognize most of the parts when I see it in the manual. Throughout this video, I try to show you some tips to use this method if you are so inclined. I always preface these videos by saying I'm just sharing the way I build. I'm not saying it's the best and only way, and to feel free to adapt it for yourself. I also demonstrate a lot of how I handle tight pegs and fits. It was hard to organize the tips really chronologically because I talked about them as they came out while building, so please bear with me and I hope it's helpful for you. What I'm gonna do first is the biggest parts. So that's gonna be the weapons. They're very easy to spot. And then I'm gonna move on to the biggest part of the kit, which is gonna be the legs, the body, the arms, and then probably the head. I don't know, it feels really good to put the head on last. You can just find the part that you need to build within the manual, just going back and forth and through. I'm gonna do the shield first. So we've got this big piece here, this long piece, and this little piece here. I already know I've got the piece here. These are from runner H, which is here. I can already see the long piece is this one. There is the handle, it's this one. So I'm so excited to put on this little yellow part. It is a little tight, just this one that won't go in. You gotta be really careful here. Pop this out. So I'm going to push this part in first because it's a little stubborn. So sometimes when you're assembling, a part might not fit. Either this part here is really thick, or I've painted the red part as well and it's gotten quite thick. I try to use minimal force. I can see there's a layer of paint here. I'm going to just cut off this layer of paint. Sometimes you can overcompensate and cut into the part a bit too, just because it's surrounded by paint. The red part here itself is also a little bit tighter. You can either cut or you can scrape. I'm going to scrape a bit here. I'm not going to try to do the sides yet because I don't want to scratch the part that's going to show, and I'm just going to see how it's going to fit. So because I can feel it already go in, I'm going to commit now and push everything else in, but let me try to get that part in first. Okay, so now I can commit. Okay, so that's what I do for tight parts, really just working the art knife. And there's a little bit of dust and residue. And when I do final assembly, I don't overcommit. I always try to leave a little crack so that if I do need to take the piece apart, I can do it. Even if you use a parts opener, because this part is metal, it will very often scratch the paint. If the parts are too tight, you can use the desk. I'm even gonna stand up here. But don't push too hard because you don't want to break the piece. Some people have asked if you tape off the pegs so that you don't paint the pegs. I've tried to do that. I found it was just way too much work, and the little bit of masking tape that goes on the peg sometimes gets blown off when you're airbrushing. Some people have told me that they pre-scrape the pegs, but it's really hard to know like how much to scrape because sometimes like this, there's no problems with the assembly. I don't feel like it's worth scraping all of the pegs. Really, usually like 70% of the pegs, they will fit. They're just a little tight, and this can still move up and down. So it's not too tight. And I think the differentiation between the metallics, it really makes a big difference. Oh, so cool. So cool. Oh, look at how well I've matched the decal before painting it. Oh my gosh, this looks so freaking awesome. Oh. I love the top coat on this. Oh, that looks so freaking, what the heck, awesome. Oh my heart. The weapons are always the coolest part of the kit. I love the little metallics. I think I pulled these out to paint them as metallic, but oh, that difference. All right, so now I'm gonna start on the legs. Basically, when I'm looking through it for a part, and I've got lots of parts here, again, I've already handled these parts a lot from sanding and painting, clipping and unclipping, that I kind of recognize roughly what it'll look like. So I look for distinctive features. This part that's a little bumpy, has a circle here, a little flap. So I just look for a part that bends and this shape. It really helps if you have a plate where the parts are all spread out and you don't have to sift through it too much, but so I'm gonna look for the both of them. Okay, so I can see that they're both the same, so I don't have to worry about which one is on the left and which one is on the right. That's why you don't need to have the runner number. Sometimes they're not the same, and then we'll talk about that after. And then I'm gonna look for both of these parts. G has that kind of bend. This. So I'm going to try to find the other one. Here it is. Oh, this is the part that will go here. Okay, I'm going to use that later. So this is really about how long it's gonna take to find a part, and I'm also talking right now. So I'm not at full concentration, so it looks like this. And since this is gonna go on the other side, I'm just gonna look for that now. Just to make, here it is, just to make my life easier after. So this is like a peg looking part, and it's quite long, and it looks like it's gonna be a big-ish piece. So I'm just looking for a peg in here. Is it this one? It's not. Okay, so I can see this one has way more details. Okay, it's not that. And I. This is I. Yeah, that's right. Here it is. You can see a little bump here, so it's gonna be like this. And then I gotta find the other one. Here it is. Okay. I do check if I need to differentiate between left and right. I can see not only from the parts that I don't have to, but here I can also see because it says ×2, so both of them are going to be the same. I haven't fully committed to pushing this in, but I feel like it's going to have a hard time going in. This peg has been clipped here, so it's going to be easier to go in the first half, but harder to go in the second half because I can already feel it's really tight, and I can even see visually that there's less paint here and more paint in here. There's a few things you can do is you can scrape with an art knife. You can sand like this. If you sand, it's only going to take very little off, and this takes a little longer. I don't really prefer to do the sanding because obviously there are some parts that you cannot get to, and it's a little easier to sand away paint. I do this sometimes. Now, on the other hand, if you ever over scrape a peg and it becomes too loose, use some super glue and apply it back onto the peg, let it fully dry, and then sand it down to be the right thickness for the part. And I try to scrape a little bit off all around the part if possible, instead of concentrating on one part. And make sure you do start from the very end of the peg and not like the middle, because you want to make sure that it will go in to the very end. Feels like it's going to fit in a lot better. So there we go. I don't want to make it too loose because you don't want your joints to be too loose, okay? There's a good grip. I also don't always find the right parts, especially when they all look very similar, like these little circular parts on the joints. In this case, I just test fit the ones that look about right until I find a fit. If the method I use here seems to be more complicated and time-consuming than pre- and disassembly, I promise you it's not. It's how I was taught by the Korean studio owners who did commission work and are trying to find maximum efficiency. The more kits they paint, the more profit they make. I do agree though that there is quite a steep learning curve, but once you've done it a few times, it gets easier. I'm going to suggest steps to how you can get here later in the video. I also want to clarify that this method is best for simpler kits, from SDs to simple MG Verkas that you paint in original color. You have to dissect the method and adjust according to what you do. For a Sazabi Verka or a PG painted in original colors, I would keep the outer armor categorized by runner letters. If I plan to do some customization work and paint in custom colors, like my black Sazabi, I did pre-assemble because I need to visually see how the custom design and colors look on the kit as a whole. For kits that have fitting issues like third-party or resin kits, I absolutely always pre-assemble and disassemble to make sure I fix all those issues before final assembly. Again, the method I'm showing you now is best for simple kits and original color paint jobs. I was just having a freak out moment not being able to find this part, which is this. I looked everywhere. I sifted through. I even looked at the empty runners. And then I was like, could it be on the floor somewhere? And guess what? This has been here for like weeks because when I don't wear my glasses, I can't see very far away. I thought it was just like a ball of dust or something. I just freaked out. Like, I was like, do I need to buy another kit? I put this part in and it's so freaking tight. It's supposed to come down like this. I'm gonna use a sanding stick because it'll just work a lot better. I can't sand everywhere because some parts will show. It's hard to do anything about inside of here. I could use some sanding paper. I think I will actually. I committed. Okay, it's actually better. It moved. These pliers are actually really useful. So I use this to pull it back out. Do a little bit more scraping. It's not pushing in too well. Oh, that's badass. People asked me after painting if the inner frame paint will scrape off. Generally, I don't have an issue with paint scraping or not being able to articulate because I've taken the precaution while I assemble to scrape off any paint that makes the joints way too tight. The paint doesn't scrape off because when I paint, I make sure to use surfacer. And I also have a good layer of paint, 2 layers of gloss black, 2-ish layers of metallic, but also not too much paint. You don't want it to be too tight. I also think that not using a top coat helps to keep the inner frame paint not too thick. So you'll see that the second time around it gets a lot easier because I've already taken out all of the parts while I was building the other leg. Now I am on the chest as I've done the legs and there's going to be fewer parts to look through. I usually try to keep my videos brief and snappy, entertaining to watch. I try to not worry too much about that for this video and let it be as long as the educational aspect of it required. However, I still had to leave a lot out. If you are interested in seeing a 40-minute, fully narrated, uncut footage of the final assembly, including the panel lining, enamel hand painting, decal application, and top coating you saw clips of at the beginning of this video, you can find it on my Patreon at patreon.com/frostsnow. It really helps to support the production of the content on this channel. Alright, so a while ago, Cookie had a friend visit Canada from Korea, and I asked him to help me pick up a few things. I couldn't ask him to bring back lacquer paints from Korea, which is really unfortunate because there's a lot of paints that I wanted, but I was able to get some other non-paint hobby stuff. So I'm gonna open it with you now. I actually haven't looked at it myself yet, and it's been sitting for like almost a month just because I haven't had a chance to film. Oh, there's some like makeup products. Okay, this is the Gunpla and this is the makeup, I think. Oh, it's not makeup. Jar of epoxy putty. We use this in Korea for our resin kits. This for filling in gaps. It was maybe like $12 or $13, which is really cheap. Oh, here's my makeup. I got a bunch of sanding sticks just because they're so cheap in Korea. So this one is free in Korea. They call it service. And this grid is actually very usable for Gunpla. What is... Oh, stickers for mono eyes. Oh, okay. Some cables and beads to replace the plastic ones. I think I wanted to get this in more sizes, but I think they were sold out on the site. And I bought everything from just one site because I didn't want to make his friend like make so many orders for me. Got so many. So I think I got these grit because these are a bit harder to find in Canada. 120, 220, 320, and 600. And the lower grits are for sanding resins, big num marks and stuff. If you're doing plastic, like I wouldn't go below 400. Here are my trusty 400s. We do generally use 400. Oh my god, how many did I get? This is like kind of the most commonly used grit. A way to kind of save money is if you use 400 grit for a while, it kind of becomes a 600. So you don't really need to buy that many of the higher grits. More 400 sponges. This was my mini Korean haul. Now for the core fighter. This is kind of the midway progress. I've already pulled out pretty much all of the parts for the core fighter. Okay, so I just want to hyper focus on this. These parts can all look the same. How do you know which parts are what without the runner numbers? I just look at the part. Like this is all useless to me, right? Unless it's an inner frame. I knew that this was a red when I had applied all of the decals. I had already searched for every part within the manual to find the respective part for the decal. I already recognized this is red. So this one has this pointy part and the peg is on the right side. So I just see which part can look like that. When they both have these points to the left, I can see there is this kind of ledge here and there isn't a ledge here. And I can see the ledge is the one on the bottom. So that means that the part with this point facing the left and the ledge at the bottom is the part that I'm looking for. So that means it's this part. And that means that's this side here. And I do that for all of the other parts as well. It's really like building a puzzle, which I really enjoy doing as a hobby when I was young. You don't have numbers, right? You just have to find what's what, and that's kind of the fun of it. Now let's talk about two other common methods for easier final assembly. First, many will pre-assemble and then disassemble and group the pieces according to body parts. Legs in one pile, arms in another. They may also find that process helps them experience the assembly beforehand and make final assembly easier. I personally don't do this because I feel like pre-assembly and disassembly is not only very time-consuming, risks breaking parts, but also unnecessary for me at this point because I can do it without the numbers. The second method to assemble without runner numbers is to cut all the group of body parts while following the manual and categorizing them without pre or disassembly. That is, turn to the first page of the instructions in the manual, which for this kit starts with the chest, and follow along and cut all the chest parts and group them together. Do the same for the rest of the body parts. Follow the manual, cut the leg parts, arms, weapons, group them all together without assembly. This would maybe be the next step if you are comfortable enough to do final assembly without pre-assembly, but still want the reassurance of having the body parts grouped together and be a little easier to find. I personally also don't do this because I find following the manual to cut parts and rummaging through all the runners also quite time-consuming. If you are new to painting and find all this very daunting, I recommend that whatever method you choose to use, experiment, start small, and do it without painting. That is, try assembling an unpainted SD or HG kit without runner numbers. It's important to try without painting first because painting causes a lot more problems. Parts are tight and paint can chip. Experiment with the different methods. Group by body parts, group by runner letters. See what feels easier. Do it a few times before you give up on it. What's even harder, try applying decals or stickers without runner numbers. If you plan to top coat before assembly, which I always do, you have to find the parts by looking at the assembled picture and flipping through the manual. As a general piece of advice, I always recommend starting really small when you are new to painting. As small as a petite bear guy, it's not beneath you. Completing small kits like this will help you understand the steps and processes involved in painting a kit before moving on to the next grade up. Instead of getting frustrated and overwhelmed, it's more important to learn and enjoy the process at the same time. The decals really bring the kit together, but I love the little bits of metallic sticking out. The panel lining and the enamel hand painting does a lot for the color separation. This, they're all enamel hand painted, and this as well really adds that extra detail. How the end game here looks like, it's really just getting easier and easier. All of these parts now are for the arms and the head. If you had a lot of difficulty at the beginning and you're kicking yourself and wishing that you did it like some other way, when you get to this part, you're gonna be really relieved. Thanks for watching! Here are the work in progress and completion photos of the Zaku project I ran on my Discord server. We set a theme and hold group projects where we can enjoy building a similar kit together, share, post, and ask questions to not only improve our painting and modeling skills, but to enjoy the hobby as part of a community. For this project, we voted on the Zaku mobile suit. Even though I never got to complete mine, and not everyone does, it was really fun seeing everyone else's version of the kit. We will be holding another group build very shortly. If you're interested in participating and receiving an invitation to my Discord server, join us at patreon.com/frostsnow. Happy building, everyone!